second day, and I'm not alone for this day. I'm joined by Nelima. Nelima, good morning.
Right, good morning, Simba. Indeed, happy new month, the September 1st, 2022. And of course, it is day 2 of the Supreme Court hearing, the presidential petition. Yesterday, which was August the 31st, was the first day of the hearing. And it was a day for the petitioners to give their submissions. And of course, there are 7 petitioners in number, and they're seeking to dispute the win of William Ruto as the president-elect, as declared by IEBC chairperson Wafula Chebukati. So it will be a day that Kenyans will yet learn some court jargons and of course that lingo right there as the hearing enters day 2, Simba.
Fantastic. What we do expect today, again, even before we go back to exactly how the stage was set yesterday, we do expect the full commissioners who termed the entire election process as opaque to get into the Supreme Court then and make their presentations. So we do expect Juliana Chebrera, we do expect Irene Masit, Justice Nyangaya, and Francis Wanderi, each to get 1 hour of presentation. Then not each 1 hour, but they'll be accorded 1 hour for their presentations so that they could explain to the Supreme Court how they termed the process as opaque. Of course, questions yesterday from some of the judges were, when did you realize that the process was opaque, and where were you until the last day of the declaration of the presidential results for you to come out and say that the election process was opaque? So all eyes on that particular sanction today. And the good thing is that we shall be live from here at Look Up TV just to give you a step-by-step analogy of exactly what goes down at the Supreme Court today, second day of hearing.
Right, Simba. And remember, yesterday, being the first day of the hearing, all the petitioners, who are 7 in number, so that is Raila Odinga, John Njoroge Kamau, Youth Advocacy Africa, Caleb Khalif, David Kariuki Ngari, Okia Omtata, and Julian Yukabi Shege. So those are the 7 petitioners, of course, represented by their lawyers in court. The petitioners, or what we also call the plaintiffs, those are the people who are actually making the case. And of course, now they are the ones expected to provide evidence so that the case, does it have any weight? Does it fall through? And of course, now day 2, as you have mentioned, the first respondents right there. And the IEBC will also be one of the respondents, as well as Wafula Chebukati, who is the IEBC chairperson, and William Ruto, who is the president-elect. And of course, there are these petitions to dispute his win, as well as the Attorney General will have its submissions, and the 3 amici courier.
Pretty much. Now that is exactly how today is sort of guided. By the way, even before we talk about the things that we're looking out in this, let me just take you through a couple of the arguments that we saw yesterday. That is from the main petitioner, that is Martha Karua and Raila Amolo Odinga, sort of representing what is the Azimio coalition. Number one, they did argue through their advocates that there was malpractice through election technology. They were talking about a broken election system interfered by 3 IEBC officials and a foreigner who were able to operate as super admins to the server. They also spoke about the interception of results before uploading on the public portal, an argument dominated by Philip Mugor, and that's what we saw at the Supreme Court judges asking, well, is it possible, Nelima, I think you saw how, is it Spoken Wanjala, isn't it? Right. Who did ask that question to Mugor, that is it possible that you could hack the physical form 34A that was then used by IEBC to present the results from the portal, because what was happening at the National Tallying Center was sort of matching what is on the portal with what has arrived at the National Tallying Center. Elicited a lot of responses and participation then from Kenyans. And the third one, that we're talking about how Form 34Cs generated 3 days before the final results were declared by Chebukati, yet tallying was still ongoing. So some of the arguments that we did see from the first petitioner, that is Martha Karua and Raila Amolo Odinga.
Right, Simba. And there was also the question of the IEBC server. And of course, the petitioners right there, James Orengo, on behalf of Raila Odinga and Martha Karua, saying that they've only been allowed to scrutinize 1 server out of the 8 that the IEBC used in the presidential elections, as opposed to what the court had directed, that the servers should remain open to all the petitioners. And of course, we saw the IEBC lawyer Gumbo saying that access will render the Supreme unusable in case of a nullification. And the Supreme Court, remember, had ordered access to the servers.
Yes.
It granted them to the petitioners. So that was the argument there on the IEBC servers standoff. Another issue, Simba, was the Wafula Chebukati's conduct, who's the chairperson of the IEBC. And of course, his conduct came in question, and petitioners there saying that they want Chebukati barred from office, and they're seeking his removal. And of course, saying that the indicator, the IEBC commission, the discrepancies and the split is an indicator of a bungled election. So his character came into question. And of course, the 50+1 question, which is the qualification for a candidate to the president in this country. And there were very many discrepancies. Julia Soweto, who was an advocate representing Raila as well as Martha Karua, saying that 8 counties had discrepancies of over 33,000, as well as the voter turnout, which still remains unclear. Simba.
Yes, pretty much. Other arguments that we saw before then, we move into what is trending this morning as pertains the proceedings that we've actually seen at the Supreme Court. Majority of what the Ruto team now, where the men responded, by the way, have to argue out again today. Number one is how the 4 IEBC commissioners who dissented, because if you saw that there was a question of the participation. What is the role of all the IEBC commissioners in delivering the presidential result? That also became an issue at the Supreme Court yesterday, where the judges were saying, well, we do understand that the person who's supposed to give out the result or declare a president is the National Returning Officer, Wafula Chebukati. But then they did ask the question, what is the role of the other IEBC commissioners in the declaration of that result? That's also another issue that was argued out yesterday. Another area as well is that there were unaccounted voters in the portal, which the Azimio coalition is arguing were all added to William Ruto, who is now the president-elect, just to help him cross the 50+1 threshold, which, as you did say, Okiya Omtanda is arguing that nobody, that is neither Raila Amolo Odinga nor Deputy President, President-elect William Ruto got the threshold that is needed to declare him the president. That's the 50+1 percentile. Another area as well is that there was another faulty register that was gazetted on the 20th of June containing 481,711 extra persons that were added onto that register. And they're saying, well, that particular gazettement was illegal on that as well. That case was also argued out. And then the last one that was argued out yesterday as well is that there was a deliberate postponement of elections in Azimio strongholds. Now, whether that really did play out in the Supreme Court, you did see that yesterday with questions of, but you guys have already won it, with the advocate saying that there could have been a better turnout if indeed they were not postponed. Nelima,
Right, Simba.
Just so we see exactly what Kenyans are talking about as regards this particular issues.
Okay. And before we get to what's trending, you've mentioned the voter postponement effect, which was, of course, one of the issues tabled there by the petitioners.
Yes.
And we saw lawyer Narji say that Raila Odinga, the postponement of the elections in their strongholds, it disenfranchised the voters, and it came just a day at 8 p.m., just a few hours to the actual voting day, which was August the 9th. And of course, the cancelling of the elections, they say, confused voters in Mombasa, Kakamega, and of course registered a significant low voter turnout, as well as the question, Simba, of KIMS kits, which were faulty in the areas that were deemed to be the Azimio strongholds.
Yes.
So those are just some of the submissions that they were making in line with the voter postponement. And now I think we'll take a look at what's trending across Twitter. Of course, this case getting into day 2 and making headlines. Kenyans are learning new language. A lot of light moments at the Supreme Court as well. And Simba, I am seeing Willis Otieno, who is an advocate, who is representing a youth organization group at the Supreme Court, of course, on this presidential petition.
Yes.
And Willis Otieno, he actually reminded us of our childhood games, the Iki Piki Ponki.
Iki Piki Ponki. I never played that game. But what was interesting, Nelima, is that, well, the judges were quick to tell him, look here, you might know exactly what that is, but we don't recognize that as a legal term that we can use to help you with the ruling.
In those premises.
Yes.
Like, actually, they called it, the language is alien.
Come up again? It is what?
It's alien.
Yes. To the courts.
It's alien to the courts. And of course, there is a specific language that you are supposed to use within the confines of the court. So Willis Otieno, of course, arguing very passionately. We saw him sweating, a lot of memes coming out after that.
Yes.
And we also saw Philomena Mwilu, who is one of the Supreme Court judges, and of course sitting on that bench of 7. And she reiterated the Nikama drama, Nikama video. That is what she says is, seems to be the outlook of the arguments, according to the petitioners.
That's it.
Right.
One of the questions that she did ask, that just, Nelima, when you listen to these judges, I like their presentations, by the way. And I like the way that CJ, Mother Kwame, set up that bench. If you listen to how the lawyers are arguing, they're using these tough terms, tough lingual that is essentially just a bona fide to the courts.
Right.
But if you listen to the Supreme Court judges, just to break it and make it clear for every Kenyan, the questions that were coming from them were quite clear. Now, let me just obviously we're talking about Philomena Mwilu.
Right.
She did ask to the Karua legal team, they asked, when a photo of a Form 34A is taken from the polling station, then she asked them, is it in PDF form?
Right.
They looked at each other. Number 2, we did see Smoking Wanjala asking the legal team for the first petitioner, that is the main petitioner, sorry, that is Martha Karua and Raila Amolo Odinga. I was like, fine, guys, we do understand when you say hacking, in just the simplest way possible. Could you tell me, is it possible to hack this physical form that then IEBC and your party agents were using to verify these results at the Bomas of Kenya? Because then indeed, if IEBC is saying the results ended at the polling stations, when was this form, the physical Form 34A, hacked? You get it, yeah? Right. Just to make it easy for every other Kenyan to understand what this is really. It's interesting to watch if you pay attention.
Okay.
Yes.
And of course, still the Form 34 is trending. Remember, there was a lot, and there was also the ballot scrutiny right there at the Supreme Court at the Forodha House, where for at least 45 ballot boxes were recounted from different regions, some from the Rift Valley region, others from the Mount Kenya region, as well as a few from the Coast region. And there were discrepancies, Simba. Some Forms 34As actually had they were blank. There was one that was blank.
Yes.
And there was a Form 34A from one of the polling stations that they presented 2 Form 34As. So there are a few discrepancies there. Or of course, today we expect a report by the judiciary. And of course, we expect to see that report just giving what are the numbers after the recounting of those votes right there, Simba.
Pretty much. Now, so that we clear on that as well, I mean, just so we touch basically on what is going on, we can look at the dailies, and Nelima, just quite quickly on that so that we see exactly what is trending on there as well before we get to review what is going down today at the Supreme Court. I've got the Daily Nation. This is the headline: Raila lawyers, how Ruto was redeemed. They're still sounding like, let me just get through this kicker quite a bit fast on it. Now, citing allegations of organized crime in the management and administration of elections, including deliberate efforts to inflate voter numbers, infiltrate the election agency's servers, and alter the formats in which election forms were transmitted, petitioners in the case against the declaration of William Ruto as president-elect want Wafula Chebukati charged. Interesting read.
Right. And on the cover of this Standard this morning, tough questions as Raila lays out the case. And of course, they've just listed a few of the cases. A divided commission could not have delivered a credible action. They also talk about the IBC contradicting figures on voter turnout. Of course, Simba, that is something that came out a lot yesterday among the 7 petitioners that Wafula Chebukati, the chairperson of the IBC, needs to come correct with exactly how many people turned up for the August 9th general elections. There was also the question of the 50+1, as we have discussed. And this is where Professor Ojenda actually said that is where the court meets mathematics, the law meets mathematics in calculating the 50+1 vote. There's also systematic deduction of votes cast for Raila that were added to Ruto in several constituencies. These are some of the arguments that the Azimio team, of course the petitioners, were arguing in court. And the requirement to declare the winner does not give chairman powers to tally, verify, and decide the winner. Simba, fantastic. Remember, among those 7 petitioners yesterday, there was the question of Wafula Chebukati being the returning officer of the presidential elections. And of course, the petitioners, the lawyers there, saying that that was a position that he gave himself and that it is not constitutional. So that is something that came about a lot yesterday. There's also the issue of postponement of the elections in Kakamega and Mombasa, which are deemed to be the strongholds of Azimir, as well as the Kimskit's failure in the areas deemed to be Raila Odinga and Martha Karua's strongholds. The issue of technology as well, Simba, as you had mentioned, and Chebukati's personal assistant, Dixon Kwanusu, illegally and maliciously accessed IEBC system. Simba, remember in the arguments yesterday in court, as you have mentioned, Philip Murgor, counsel right there, saying that the system was hacked and there were other foreigners who had access and they were in a position even to alter results. And one of the last things that they mentioned is the discrepancies in the results that amount to over 180,000 votes. And the numbers in these elections, really matter because the margin, again, was very small.
It's quite close, isn't it?
Yeah, so several thousand of votes could really create a difference.
Because everybody does know then that even 50,000, by the way, I was listening to some of the lawyers argue that if you take out 50,000 from the president-elect William Ruto's result, then the 0.04 then will be put into question. Interesting, really, and those are the questions that we're going to see today. Just quickly, Nelima, because we do have a couple of minutes before then the Supreme Court convenes again for the second day of hearing. Let me just give you a snapshot of exactly what to expect today. Today, Juliana Cherera, Irene Masit, Justice Nyangaya, and Francis Wanderi. Those are the 4 commissioners who dissented from the result that Wafula Chebukati, who is the national returning officer by law for the presidential results delivered. They'll be given 1 hour each among them to present their evidence as to why they think that indeed the result that Wafula Chebukati released was not the one that Kenyans voted 4. Number 2, we do also have IEBC. It's going to be very interesting, Nelima, to see how IEBC then responds to these claims of inflated voter register, adding of votes in other places, and Form 34As, missing contributions for 34Cs as well, completely blank. They're saying, well, under the chairperson, Wafula Chebukati, they'll be granted 3 hours to dismantle the case for the main petitioner, that is Raila Amolo Odinga and Mother Karua. There'll also be 30 minutes for the AG to defend themselves, all right?
Right.
Against the accusation leveled against them as well. Now, if you do remember, the AG did declare himself a neutral factor in this particular case. What we've seen in other elections, Nelima, if you go back to 2017, the AG is expected to be a friend of the court.
Right.
But this time around, the AG did rule out himself and saying, guys, I've got no side in this particular case. Let the matters play out. With majority of the advocates for the Azimio coalition saying, well, that's not good. Especially, what do you mean then? You need to have a stand in this particular proceedings, because an election is a government issue and you should be in the court helping them out in particular matters as well. Nelima, what do we expect next today?
Of course, you have mentioned the respondents. Today, day 2. Day 1 was for all the petitioners just to table their submissions as they seek to dispute William Ruto's win as declared by IEBC chairperson Wafula Chebukati. And of course, day 2 being today, all the respondents, as you have mentioned, are going to respond to those accusations that have been made by the petitioners, who are 7 in number. And tomorrow, which is going to be day 3, the hearing is going to be 3 days long. So tomorrow will be a rejoinder by petitioners.
Yes.
And the submissions on the scrutiny of report. After which, then the 7 bench judges of the Supreme Court will retreat and then come back with a feedback on Monday, either to uphold the elections as presented by IEBC chairperson Wafula Chebukati and uphold William Ruto's win, or nullify the election. There are very many possible scenarios, and also what the petitioners, especially the ones representing Raila Amolo Odinga and Martha Karua, arguing that the court should actually allow them just to recount votes as opposed to going back for a rerun. So there are many possible scenarios that we could be looking at, Simba, after these 3 days of hearing, which started yesterday. So it's Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and then the judges retreat and then go deliberate on the evidence that they have been given, and of course give us feedback on the way forward. And Simba, just to move a little bit away from the Supreme Court.
Yes.
President Uhuru Kenyatta appeared in public for the first time on the streets of Mombasa.
Yeah, he went for ice cream.
Right. And also had like a Swahili dish in a restaurant, just being very ordinary. Remember, this is his first public appearance.
By the way, he's not spoken anything, has he?
Right. He did not address the public. He waved around and, of course, just dancing a little to some music. He seemed to be very energetic as well.
Well, Nelima, when you look at it, but this is exactly what is expected. Number one, I know it's not been 30 days since we conducted the 9th August election. There's government business that should be going on right now. Right. By the way, is not officially open the 13th Parliament, because by law, the members of parliament were elected in the just concluded 9th August election. By law, you're still a member of parliament elect.
Right.
So you can actually see why guys are saying, I mean, you got to come out and speak something. There's a lot of things going on in the country. You are still the president as far as we are concerned. In fact, you should be opening the National House because Nelima, you could see we are starting September with the highest inflation since 2017. It's 8.5. I mean, it's just a couple of points away from the 9.7% that we were actually riding on in 2017. So that's why they're saying, well, I mean, President, sir, with all due respect, could you officially open the 13th Parliament so that as all this goes on, we could actually start settling and setting laws that actually get to help some Kenyans right now as we speak? But good for him. He looked relaxed. His shirt was folded, and he was having
in a nice casual outfit in jeans. Right. And of course, Simba, as you have mentioned,
Yes.
there are indeed other things that are going on, even as the presidential petition is at the Supreme Court. For instance, the inflation, the high cost of living. There is still hunger
Yes.
in the ASL regions in this country. So, not to forget that there are still other stories that are making headlines. And of course, our viewers can catch that right here on Lookup TV.
Fantastic. What we do know is that once then the petition just begins in just a couple of minutes from now, we shall be stepping back so that we see exactly how those processes go. Remember, today it's going to be very interesting because all eyes, yes, in as much as it is on the Supreme Court, number one, it's going to be on the four IEBC commissioners who dissented from the result that Wafula Chebukati released. And number two, how IEBC is going to respond then to these particular petitions. By the way, they're very interesting because if you look at Okium Tana, he's saying none among those presidential aspirants, did hit the 50+1 mark that is needed then to be declared as president. If you go, number one, by some of the issues that have been raised in the other petitions and just how close it was, Okium Tata's argument is, number one, if you look at the 1,665,512 people that voted after 5 p.m. based on IEBC data, is saying this is not possible and points to manipulation of election results. That is his main argument because he's saying, how do you get 1,665,412 people to vote after 5 p.m.? Quite interesting then for us to look into the second day.
Right, and of course, Simba, as we're about to head to the Supreme Court, of course, one of the things that to note is the IBC chairperson of Wafula Chebukati, whose character has come under a lot of heat. And of course, he oversaw the 2017 election, which was nullified. And of course, his character is in question yet again. So depending on the verdict of the court,
yes,
then, you know, it's a sweet and sour for him. It could go either way. And of course, his character dented or otherwise, depending on the outcome of this presidential petition results. And of course, the 7 petitioners seriously attacking his character on the day one of the hearing of the case. So we're just going to be looking forward to what the respondents have to say, the 4 IBC commissioners, as well as the president-elect William Ruto, as well as the Attorney General and the others respondents. Simba, I do understand we have to say goodbye.
Actually, take a little break, isn't it?
Crossing over to the Supreme Court in just a few. So we take a very short break here on the Morning Drift. So much more coming up, including crossing over to the Supreme Court on day 2 of the hearing of the presidential petition.
election petition, where Raila Odinga is challenging the win of William Ruto. His team of lawyers had told the court that no presidential candidate met the constitutional threshold of 50+1% to be declared winner in the first round. James Orengo, while presenting evidence to the court, says there is a contradiction in figures declared by the electoral body and that the final tally is therefore misleading. Our reporter Henry Tende on that front.
Thank you very much. We have taken the appearances. We will straight away go to the petition.
When the floor was opened for the petitioners to argue out their case, a team of lawyers representing Azimio leader Raila Odinga, led by senior counsel James Orengo, took to the occasion armed with what they believe is sufficient evidence to annul the results of the August 9th presidential elections as declared by IEBC Chair Wafula Chebukati. In part of the evidence, senior counsel James Orengo maintains no single candidate garnered 50+1% of the total votes cast to win the elections in first round, as is stipulated in the elections laws under the new constitution.
Unlike many elections, this particular election, there was deceit, there was manipulation, and all this was premeditated.
Orengo told the court the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, through the chair Wafula Chebukati, made contradictory declaration of voter turnout figures and percentages at different intervals of voting, and that the final tally, declared on 15th of this month, did not agree with the previous figures.
We are going to demonstrate that the number of voters who took part in the elections and the number of votes cast in the election is indeterminate and is a moving target. It keeps on shifting.
Additionally, the senior counsel has established there was a deliberate and systematic reduction of votes cast in favor of Raila Odinga, and the same added to President-elect William Ruto in a case he says defeats democracy and the true will of the people of Kenya.
There was a systematic deduction of the votes cast for the first petitioner, and the same number of votes that were deducted from the petitioner were added to the votes of the second respondent.
Raila Odinga, through Orengo, pleads that IEBC failed to conduct a free, fair, transparent and verifiable election, and that his rights to a credible electoral exercise were violated.
You have a commission that is divided right in the middle. That speaks to a dysfunctional constitutional body that is not capable, that is dysfunctional and cannot be able to preside over an election.
On this ground of evidence, Raila Odinga, once the highest court in the land, finds that
you nullify the elections on the basis of the fact that the second respondent did not attain more than 50% plus one of the votes cast in the election.
Henry Tende, Look Up TV.
All right, that's exactly how it started yesterday. Those are some of the arguments from the first advocate for Azimio coalition, that is the main petitioner then challenging that result. Nelima, it is 6 minutes past 9. We saw a lot of a discipline from Mother Commerce Code yesterday in terms of keeping that time. We do understand that they're just about to begin.
And of course, they're really not African timers, right on time. And of course, very understandable, because we only have 3 days for the hearing. The hearing started yesterday, the 31st of August, through to today, the first day of September, and tomorrow, the 2nd day of September. A 3-day hearing case, and of course, it has 7 petitioners and another list of respondents, as well as a rejoinder, which is going to make day 3 of that hearing, and after which the judges, the 7-bench judge, is going to retreat and give a feedback, and of course the results of the case on Monday, either to nullify or to uphold. as well as many other scenarios that could present itself after the hearing of the case. So Simba, in any minute now, we'll be crossing over to the Supreme Court. And of course, as you had mentioned, the 4 IEBC commissioners, they are now called the opaque 4 because they argued that the process at the tail end was carried out in an opaque manner. That was their argument. And of course, it will be interesting just to see how they're going to respond in court, of course, by their lawyers, how they're going to respond in line with the accusations made by the 7 petitioners yesterday. A lot of questions coming up about the IEBC split commission. So can a split commission give solid results, Simba?
That's exactly what it is. But how we got here, it's really interesting, Nelima, when you look at how they made an application for representation. Now, this is it, that even as these particular commissioners then represent themselves independently in front of the Supreme Court, by the way, they are still IEBC, Nelima. Just hold on back, because none of them has actually come out to say, well, we do now resign and we are not IEBC. So IEBC today again has a representation which is follows immediately after the presentation by the 4 commissioners who dissented with Wafula Chebukati. So it's going to be interesting, sort of Kenyans being treated to this particular drama that we're seeing here right now, where we have IEBC, all right, getting represented, and we do know that the 4 commissioners are also part of IEBC. So they're also getting represented in front of the Supreme Court saying, yes, we are IEBC. We partly agree with these results, but there are areas that we do not agree with Wafula Chebukati. In fact, what you do have today, and that's the first section of the hearing today, is going to be the 4 IEBC commissioners versus IEBC. That is the presentation that we're going to see today. Also, Nelima, we do also expect that indeed the Supreme Court today is going to receive a report on the 15 polling stations, yes, that they ordered a proper recount on yesterday.
Right. And of course, we saw that it went late into the night, the recounting of those votes. Remember, they were given 48 hours and time is running fast. And of course, there's need for that report to be given today in court about the progress so far and any discrepancies, if there were there, mentioned in the court. And of course, this is what the 7 petitioners of this case had asked for. Remember on the pre-trial conference that a search of a recount of some of the ballot boxes from different regions, which they suspect might have been used to alter the results of the presidential elections. And Simba, as you had mentioned about the 4 commissioners, the 4 IEBC commissioners who had dissenting views, there is a question, a tough question that, of course, Judge Philomena Mwilu asked yesterday and said, when exactly did the commission become dysfunctional? And why didn't the officials protest before? That is just one of the things we are going to be looking forward as the case is now ongoing. Simba, I do understand we have to cross over. Simba?
Pretty much. Now, let's then cross over to the Supreme Court, where what we expect, number one, is the 4 commissioners then who are going to make their presentation, and then later on, IEBC will come in. Let's cross over live so we get to listen in as well.
For the further hearing of the presidential petition number E005 of 2022. As consolidated with E001, E002, E003, E004, E007, and E008, Raila Amolo Odinga and 7 others versus William Ruto and others.
A very good morning to everybody, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's proceedings. I'm looking at the consolidated petition